Do you have questions surrounding these fights right here? Like, you want to know how they're going to play out, what kind of fighters they are, who's going to win these fights? You've come to the right place. It's Correlation Nation. Today, we're going over Dana White's Contender Series, week number 6. And I'm not going to drag this along. We're going to get right into it, okay? The first fight we're going to be starting with is the bottom fight, and we're going to be working our way to the top. So let's get right into it. The first fighter we're going to be looking at is Cody Chovancek. And this guy's a slightly light-footed fighter. He shows a bit of bounce, but tends to be a little bit ploddy, or he does tend to plod forward using measured pressure and decent footwork. Striking is pretty solid. He carries a high guard, decent 1-2. But this guy will enter the pocket with an overhand right. It's a punch that, if he connects with, yeah, he's got good power with it, but it's also a punch that can be countered pretty easily by a more technical striker. So he counters pretty well himself and seems to have pretty good power. He has nice front side low kicks, solid backside kicks to the front and side. He will use them sporadically, so it's not a weapon that he fights behind, so it's something he will definitely throw. It's just not super methodical. It's like he'll throw it just kind of here and there or whenever. Muay Thai clinch looks pretty solid, and he does look strong in a clinch and wrestling. He tends to do it defensively. And it looks pretty solid. I know that he fights out of, I think it's the Niagara Falls top team or whatever. And that's a pretty good camp up there. So I'd say his wrestling stuff is at least decent. It looked pretty good. And then on the other side of this, we have Raphael Uchegbu. And this guy is a guy that when we pull him up real quickly, I'm pretty sure he's fought in Bellator. I think he fought in PFL. So he's a guy that's, been around a little bit. Yeah, he's fought in both of those. Lost in PFL, won both his bouts in Bellator. Let's get into the breakdown though. He is a light-footed striker. He shows solid bounce with decent footwork using measured pressure with a bit of range management. Striking looks good. He has a high guard, solid left jab, nice right cross, snappy backside kicks. He throws pretty good knees, but I have questions around this guy's fight IQ. It seems that he may be mistake prone. Now I don't want to say he is, but he puts himself in some bad spots at times. And so I don't really love that. Another thing is this guy's willing to engage in the clinch or wrestling sequences, and he doesn't really seem to have very good control. Does seem to scramble okay, and he will work to get up. And then it's like, his positional awareness. So when you look at his record, you'll see the guy actually has quite a few submissions and what have you. Yeah, he's got 5. He's never actually been submitted. And he's fought some decent competition. At least the records look that way. But, the way I looked at this is I would go to some of the more difficult matchups and try to gauge how those went. So a lot of the tape that I didn't watch all these fights. I don't think I could find all of them, but I'm pretty sure I looked at his PFL loss, and yeah, that's the way it looked to me. You can see, the arm bar, rear naked, triangle choke. Yeah, it all looks good on paper, but again, lower level competition. This arm bar is a 1-0 guy, rear naked 0-0 guy, triangle 1-1 guy. So up here, the arm bar to an 8-1 guy, that looks a little bit better. So maybe it's something that's improved a bit. But I still got real questions around that, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, when it comes to this fight more specifically, I do kind of tend to favor Cody. That's just how I walked away from the fight. I think that there's a real chance that Uchegbu could, kind of pick and poke at him from range a little bit, he does seem to be like a little bit more of a rangy fighter, longer strikes, the jab cross and the teep, or, those backside kicks. Those are more like range weapons. But I do like that Cody I like that he has a good clinch game, and I like that he can wrestle. Now I do kind of see this as being a stand up fight mostly. But the thing is Uchegbu, like this guy, like I said, he was willing to engage in these clinching and wrestling sequences. And if that's the case, that's going to put Cody in a spot where he could certainly use that Muay Thai clinch or um but this is an interesting fight. It's pretty tough. Like I said, I happen to lean on the Cody side of things. But this is a tough fight to call for sure. I'll be interested to see how they size up, but also, yeah, I mean, sizing up is going to be the big thing for me. I don't know that you can have a super strong lean in this fight necessarily, but I'm going to go with Cody. There's enough red flags on the Raphael side that I'm not going to be running to pick him, fight IQ, and yeah, it's just concerning to me. But let's move on to the next bout. The next bout we do have we have Hwang going against McCorry, and let's pull up Insu. All right, Insu. This guy's a fairly light-footed striker. He shows pretty good bounce, but tends to be pretty plotty at times. Fights behind a pawing guard and solid kicking game. Likes to throw the backside high kick. Counters with his hands. Seem to have powerful cross. Keeps his head on the center line, but seemingly has a good chin. Can be low volume. Ground game is a big question. So I'm not real sure what to think or how to feel about this guy. Honestly, I mean, I feel like his stand-ups, it's okay. He seems that he may have some pretty legit power, but all in all, I wasn't like overly impressed with his skill set. And there's a lot of unknowns when it does come to his ground game because it just doesn't seem that many people were, trying to get it to the ground. 8-1 record. He's 31 years of age. Mm, yeah, I mean, obviously he could catch you with some, but we're gonna have to wait and see. But the thing is I don't think he's the A side of this. I think he's B side because when I pull up his opponent, Paddy, and pull up his Tapology, 2070, 6'3", so he's obviously got a pretty good size advantage in this. Never been knocked out, never been submitted. He has lost to the decision. So he did lose a submission, Robert Valentin, on the Ultimate Fighter. I'd have to go back and watch that fight, but nonetheless, let's look at his notes. So he's a fairly light-footed striker. He shows solid balance with lateral movement and good footwork. He's a technical kickboxer with good fundamentals. He has a high guard, effective switch stance fighter, snappy kicks, low front push, a front push kick, and a side kick. Changes levels when entering pocket and puts together clean combinations. Power looks solid. Questions on the ground game, not seeing much. So I didn't see much in his ground game in the fights that I was able to catch. But this is not a fight I see going to the mat. This is probably going to be a stand-up fight mostly, and I highly favor Paddy in this matchup. I think Paddy is, he's got the better frame for the division. He has just the more technical skill set. When you see him drop levels as he enters the pocket, and he'll put together 2, 3, four punch combinations, and they're they're really nice. They're really clean. I really liked what I've seen from his stand up. Now, obviously, we do have questions around his ground game, and it'll be interesting to see if for any reason this fight does end up on the mat. Again, not really what I'm anticipating, but You never really know, especially when you're talking about guys. Like, there's just a lot of unknowns on both of these guys. But yeah, I'm going to be favoring Paddy. I think he comes out of this a winner. And then on to the next match, we have Tommy. I don't know if that's Gantt or Gott. But anyways, we have Tommy going against Adam Livingston. Tommy is a guy that, let's pull up his profile just real quick because I think that he's a little bit older. And so he's 32. But here's the thing about this guy. I don't think he's your typical 32-year-old guy, right? Because look at this. Amateur bout. He got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fights in between April, May, like a year span. And then even in his profession, look at this. The amount of fights this guy was putting together. Tons of wins, tons of fights in a short amount of time. So he really expedited his fighting career. Well, not expedited necessarily, but he got into it late, so he just full go. Going against Adam Livingston. Now, let's look up their notes. So we have Thomas. This guy's a fairly light-footed pressure striker. He shows solid bounce with decent footwork. Striking looks surprisingly good. Has a really long 1-2-4. Will look to close the gap where he can use his clinch to threaten takedowns, front chokes, and use nasty clinch striking, elbows, knees, dirty boxing. He is an impressive looking hammer. This dude looks like a freaking juggernaut out there. Maybe not so much the size, but he just, for whatever reason, his build kind of reminds me of John Bones Jones. And his clinch game is pretty nasty. Okay, so he's going against Adam Livingston. Adam is a guy that is fairly light-footed, shows decent bounce with a bit of footwork and some range management. Striking is okay. He has a decent left jab, tends to extend itself when throwing in combination from range. Does have some solid kicks. He carries his hands low, counters pretty well, and this is a guy that seems to strike well in chaos. I've noticed that it's a dangerous game to be playing, but he seems to find calm within the chaos, and he's able to land some kind of wide. It's not like the most technical striking, but he's able to find himself within that chaos, and it's kind of impressive, but yeah, it'll be interesting how that plays out. But anyways, takedown defense looks decent enough, has a nice sprawl, seems to have pretty solid chin. This fight could play out a couple different ways. For me, I think Thomas is the A side because, his fighting style is just really, really impressive. I don't know that Adam Livingston's going to be able to avoid what Thomas is trying to do. Now, the reason I think this could play out a couple different ways is because Adam does seem to be pretty tough, and because he does find calm within chaos. And so the way Thomas fights is pretty chaotic, just to be 100% honest. And so if for some reason Adam is able to find himself within that, sure, there's a chance he could catch him. Or, it seems that the way Thomas fights also takes quite a bit of energy. And so if Adam's able to kind of live through that, weather that storm, then it'll be interesting to see how Thomas looks later in that fight. But I do still believe that Thomas is the A side of this fight. I think that he'll be able to strike fairly well from range, and I think that eventually he's just going to close that gap, and he's going to put him up against the cage. And you're going to see this clinch work. He's going to go to work in the clinch, and there's a real chance he can knock him out, or just be so relentless that the ref has no choice but to stop the fight. And so I'm going to side with Thomas. It'll be really, really interesting what other people have to say about this. That's why I want to know what other people think about this fight. But Thomas looks like a really, really good prospect. I just, you have to have questions. Let's pull him up again real quick and see if he's gone long. Does have one decision win. Went to the third round more recently. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's going to try to finish the fight. I mean, like I said, he hasn't fought great level competitions, that's for sure. But I was impressed with the way he fights, so it'll be interesting to see. And let's move on to the next bout. The next bout we have, Iwo Baraniewski, I don't know, going against Mahamed Aly. Okay, yeah, no, not the Mahamed Ali we've all come to know, but a new one, right? It's a new Muhammad. Another variation. All right, let's pull up our first guy. We have. All right. This guy's a light-footed striker. He shows solid balance. Footwork looks solid. Use measured pressure with some range management. Striking looks okay. He carries a high guard. Throws pretty heavy backside low kick and side kick. Likes to enter the pocket with an overhand right. Seems to have some real takedown ability. Advances well on the mat with nasty ground and pound from the back mount. Yeah. His ground and pound from the back is pretty nasty. And this is a super interesting fight too, and we'll dig into that in just a second. But Muhammad on the other side, fairly light-footed striker, shows some bounce with solid footwork and movement. Fights behind his backside kicks. He really likes to throw high and aside. Guard seems decent. Boxing looks a bit loose, but seems to have big power. And this guy is a world-class BJJ player. So this is super interesting. I think that Adam's way of winning a lot of fights is, he seems solid enough on the feet, but he's certainly going to be looking for the takedown, and he's going to be looking to advance, get to a position of control, and go to work with his ground and pound. I mean, that's basically the type of fighter he is, whereas Muhammad Ali is a guy that seems to be kind of I wouldn't say he's super technical on the feet, like fairly technical, fundamentally he's not bad, but you can tell that, like I said, the boxing is just a little bit loose, a little bit wide. But he is pretty dynamic. He has some really dynamic kicks. I see him throw axe kicks and different things of that sort. So he does look pretty dynamic, looks to be a really good athlete. And then the really interesting part of this matchup is the ground game, because if Adam's wanting to get to the mat and Ali's just a world-class BJJ guy, does this stay on the feet? Who's got the size advantage? This is a pretty tough one. I'm gonna tend to lean. I'm gonna tend to lean with Muhammad on this for a couple of reasons. One, I do think that the stand up's gonna be fairly close. Like I said, they're not gonna win most of their fights, especially at the UFC level. Standing with some of the best strikers in the world, at least not at this point. But I do think that Ali's a little bit more dynamic on the feet. And I think that if Adam's path to victory is on the mat, that could be trouble for him. Because your best chance at winning, or not your best chance at winning, but the way that you typically win is kind of a negative for you, because you're taking a guy that has world-class BJJ to the mat. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. I do like this fight quite a bit. I'm going to lean with the Ali side. But we have to be realistic in the fact that, you can't throw punches in BJJ, right? So, Muhammad going from a high level competitor in the BJJ world to fighting in MMA, You get on the mat, you try to go for something that puts you in like makes you vulnerable because you're in a position where you can still get punched going for a submission. Now the one big question I do have on Ali that I'm not real sure is kind of his grappling style. Is he more of like a control grappler or an actual submission threat? I know that he is a submission threat, but I feel like there are two different types of grappling. You have the grapplers that are very, very aggressive offensively and just attempt a lot of submissions, constantly transitioning, looking for the next submission. And then you got guys that kind of scramble and float and try to stay in a position of control. And, if it presents itself, sure. But, you can win these matches by control as well. So I haven't watched, I watched very little of his BJJ tape. Um, and so I didn't really come away with it with a strong indication or a strong lean on which side he falls on. But I'll be keeping my eye on that, and it'll be interesting because, like I said, if he is a guy that's looking to transition into positions that make him a little bit vulnerable, that could be an issue for him in the MMA world. But he may not be that type of grappling BJJ guy. So I'm gonna lean with Ali on this. Fight probably doesn't see the cards. And then we have Hecher Sosa going against Macksom Lee. Another really, really interesting fight. Sosa is a very light-footed striker. He has good bounce, solid footwork, uses lots of movement to maintain range. Will pick his spots at range and look to counter. He looks very fluid, strikes well off the back foot. He's a creative striker. He's a strong clinch player. Brutal knees, takedown defense looks pretty solid. He sprawls very well. Seems to wrestle and grapple defensively pretty well. And on the other side, you got Macksom Lee. So Macksom is a guy that is a light-footed striker, shows solid bounce with some evasive footwork, but he can be pressured straight back. He's a rangy fighter, very long for the division. Seems to fight behind his jab and teep, will throw flashy kicks and flying knees. Takedown defense seems okay. Shows real urgency getting to his feet. He has nasty ground and pound with elbows. And this guy has some really nice choking arms. I am very, very confused about this fight, and I'm confused why it's the main event, personally, because I think that both of these guys, in their own right, look really, really good in their own way. Now, stylistically and how these guys match up is not my favorite, because I do feel like Hecher Sosa is a guy that, if you watch the UFC, you got to watch David Martinez the other day. This guy's, I wouldn't say the same, but stylistically a little bit similar. He is going to use his footwork and he is going to do a lot of movement to try to maintain that range. And he's going to strike off the back foot a lot of times. And he does a pretty good job of that. Strong clinch player. So if you do, and that's the other thing I like about him is that, he is kind of a range striker that does really well in that position. But if you get close enough to him, he's a guy that will engage in the clinch. He has a really good, strong clinch game. The sprawl and his takedown defense looks solid. And he can, again, to what level, but, it seems he can wrestle and grapple defensively fairly well. But to what level, I don't know. That's something we're not really sure of yet. And then Macksom Lee, this guy's huge, okay? He's like 6'1" at 100, what is he, 135 pounds or something? I mean, this dude's huge for the division. And while he is pretty lean, like he is very skinny, he's got quite a bit of muscle mass on him as well I don't know, it's kind of impressive. So he looks like a pretty good prospect. But, yeah, I don't know. It'd be really, really interesting to see if one of these guys is willing to go forward. Who's it going to be? This is a tough fight. I really like Sosa. I think he looks really, really good. But then Macksom looks pretty solid himself, and that long, long frame of his is going to be really, really hard for Sosa to, I think, find success in what he wants to do. I don't know. This one's really, really hard to pick. I'm curious to see what some of the other people in the space think about this fight. Well, I think both of them could potentially be UFC level guys. I just think this is a terrible matchup for Sosa. I honestly do, because I think Macksom's a guy that you want to crowd the kicker. Basically, I'm gonna go with Lee. I think the size is just gonna be too much to overcome for Sosa. But I do like Sosa. I think that in most other fights, if he wasn't fighting a guy that had such a large size advantage on him, I would almost certainly be on the size of Sosa. I think this guy looks really, really good, and I just think that the size is going to be a little too much for him to overcome. So, I don't know. If you have any thoughts and opinions on it, feel free to leave it in the comment section. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll catch y'all later. All right. Good luck, everybody.